Bloodbath at the House of Death is a 1984 British comedy directed by Ray Cameron.
The year is 1975, and we're at a house that is used as a businessman's weekend retreat and a girls' summer camp. Obviously, two things that go together. Yeah. And there's 18 people staying there at the time, and they're all brutally killed by various different means by assailants dressed in monk robes. So one gets blown up, and some gets skewered, and various other horrifying deaths. So then we cut to nearly 10 years later, and we meet 8 scientists who are all on their way to this house to investigate some strange radioactive readings that have been taken in and around the area. They arrive at the house and begin their investigation, and all the while there's a satanic cult preparing a ritual under the guidance of a sinister man.
But does it hold up today? I guess if bad sex jokes and cleavage are your thing, probably so. Yeah. I mean, I hadn't heard of this one before. You mentioned we should give this a go. And I had heard of it, so I hadn't seen it before. I'd heard of it. Kind of thought, probably know what I'm going to get here.
It's got Kenny Everett in it.
Kenny Everett. But it was, it was okay. It was pretty bad.
Yeah.
Going into it, I thought it's got Vincent Price in it.
Yeah,
so,
exactly.
Vincent Price... I mean, actually, if anything, Vincent Price kind of holds it together. We've done a couple of Vincent Price films on the channel. We did Theatre of Blood, we did Mask of the Red Death, and we did Dead Heat, which he kind of was one of his last films that he features in a little bit. So he's in this one a little bit. He's only in a few scenes. But
he was in it more than I was expecting.
He was, yeah. But, he's Vincent Price, and he always gives an amazing performance. Yeah. And even here, he gives an amazing performance. There's a very funny scene, which kind of felt like he was... There's a scene where he basically speaks this kind of incantation, if you will, and then this woman tells him to piss off. And then he goes over it again. He's like, I've done all this amazing magic. I'm this big demon, and I am standing here just so you can tell me to piss off. Which is kind of like, I've made all these incredible films, and yet here I am in this
junk.
Throwaway load of junk. I mean, so I think with Vincent Price being there, you kind of expect it to be a send-up of like Hammer, especially at this time. But it's actually more a send-up of films that came out around that period, I feel. I mean, there's bits of Hammer in there as well.
It's like Carry On with Gore, isn't it?
It's like Carry On with Gore, yeah, exactly. I mean, there's nods to The Shining in there. There's nods to The Entity, which we actually covered, a few months ago.
Yeah.
There's
although questionable nods.
Very questionable. That scene was very questionable. Yeah. There's E.T., Carrie.
Yep.
And I thought that was quite amusing with a deadly can opener.
Yes.
Which was, I think that's, the film was balmy.
Yeah.
It was very, paced. The pacing was very slow. The editing was slow. I mean, as a lot of these films were in the 80s. But there was some kind of clever effects there. At times, which worked quite well.
It had all the bawdy humour I was expecting of it.
Yeah.
There were some good gags, particularly some visual gags. I mean, it's on Netflix. I can't remember if you already mentioned that, but it is. And they either use the trailer to preview it, or they'll show a clip from the film to preview it. And in this case, they show a clip, which is, I can't remember whose character it is, but one of the characters in a library, and she's taking books off the shelf, and the first one she takes is called The Secret Door, and as she pulls it off the shelf, a secret door opens behind her. She doesn't notice, and then the next one is the sudden spear. The spear shoots out. Which, when I saw that as the preview, I thought, that's quite an interesting visual gag. I wonder what, and then I saw that Vincent Price was in it, and it was a Kenny Everett film, and I thought, wonderful, could be a laugh. But, in parts it is funny, other parts not so much. It's got really land.
It's got a lot of those. I mean, most of the people in here are TV stars. I mean, Kenny Everett, it's obviously a Kenny Everett film. This is the one and only film he ever made. If you're not aware of who Kenny Everett is, then he kind of graced our screens in the 80s. He died young. He was 50 when he died. But he was kind of, I suppose, sketch shows. We had a lot of... You see so many sketch shows now, but he had the Kenny Everett television show was his show. It was lots of kind of, quick, short gags, which kind of these films, sometimes they don't always work as longer films. It's like sitcoms. We obviously have lots of famous sitcoms that have had movies made out of them, and they don't always work here. I'm specifically talking about British sitcoms and their film counterparts. They don't always...
It does almost feel like a series of sketches.
It does feel like a series of sketches, and some of them work and some of them don't. But that's obviously where Kenny Everett is famous for. And in fact, Ray Cameron, who directed and wrote this, along with Barry Cryer, who sadly passed away recently. Barry Cryer is famous. He's a comedy writer in this country. They, I think, at time worked on the Kenny Everett show, so they all knew each other. I mean, Cleo Rockus, who is in this,
was on the
show as well with him too. So it is kind of a mishmash of British stars. Pamela Stevenson is in it. She went on. Well, she was in. Was it not the 9 o'clock news with Rowan Atkinson?
Yes, I think so. Yeah.
I think it's that. And Mel Smith and Griffith Jones, that's where she came from. She obviously married Billy Connolly.
And John Fortune, who was in Bremner, Bird and Fortune.
Yep, he's in there too. And then people like Gareth Hunt and Graham Stark and Don Warrington. These are all famous names from British TV over the years. More TV than film.
Yeah.
So it's kind of got a TV sensibility to it, this film, I think. You think of other comedy films from that time, you think of things like Monty Python. But this, to me, feels more like Mel Brooks. It's the Mel Brooks kind of send-up of films. There are many... there's a gag in here where, so you've got this house in the background, and this guy... I don't know if you ever find out who that person is, but he's looking... He's kind of looking at the house, so he's looking through the tree branches, and he lets go of the tree branch and kind of smacks him in the face. There's that joke.
Yeah, we never do find out who that is.
Who that is, no. And then there's another great gag, actually, which is where you've got a guy creeping down a corridor, and in the background is this cello playing this kind of, haunting music.
That was so obvious.
And it's so obvious, and he's kind of creeping. He's like creeping down and creeping down.
Like Jaws
and he opens,
music, wasn't it?
Yeah, like Jaws music. He opens the door, and there's Kenny Everett sitting on the loo playing the cello
for no reason.
For no reason whatsoever. But then, of course, if you look at some of the Mel Brooks films, there's obviously the send up of Vertigo, the Hitchcock film, and there's the classic moment where the camera comes down. And in a Hitchcock film, it might go through a window, but of course, in this film, being Mel Brooks, it crashes through the window plane. It's that kind of sight gag, breaking the fourth wall, so to speak.
And
it doesn't always hit the nail here. Whereas Mel Brooks is often funnier and it works.
There's a running gag with a blind guy. One of the cultists is blind, and he's constantly bumping into things. And it's like. It's funny. It's never really funny, is it? Because it's like it just keep repeating it over and over again. It's like we get it. He can't see where he's going. Even though he's carrying a cane.
It's kind of one of those films. There's hit and miss jokes in it. I suppose at the end of the day, at least there is a plot in there.
Well,
there's
just about.
There's a half decent plot in there. With these cultists and...
the plot is pretty thin and barely there, but there's lots of these weird things that never really amount to anything, like the guy who's got the big mole that he says causes amnesia for certain things, but then that's never mentioned again. And then they're going to look for something to eat, and they end up in the freezer. And before they go in, there's like this pork pie, which is like pulsating and glowing. And then they open the door, it stops. And then they just pick it up and go and eat it. But it's like, why was it pulsating? I don't understand. What's that? It's a bit like a possessed pork pie or something.
Yeah, it wasn't terrible. I think it's... If you can see it free on Netflix, then do.
Give it a go. You get a few laughs and you get a great Vincent Price cameo.
The stuff that kept Vincent Price is in there is great. It's Bloodbath at the House of Death. A lot of British hammer horror... And Agatha Christie, and then there were none. That was, it is the whole, people go to a haunted house, or people go to a big old house, and then they die off mysteriously one by one. It's a send up of that idea, which is kind of the classic, house guests plot. Very gory, but there's a couple of gory-esque moments.
Yeah.
And I loved actually how it spoofed train spotting before train spotting became a thing.
Did it?
With the toilet.
Well, oh yeah. Yes. True, yes.
Maybe that's where train spotting got the toilet gag from. I don't know. It's terrible.
Yeah.
But it's okay.
It got pretty mauled when it was released.
I'm sure it did.
But I don't think that was helped. During its production in 1983, Kenny Everett went to a Conservative Party conference and gave a little speech.
Right.
where he suggested that we bomb Russia, which didn't go down very well. Yeah, it caused a lot of controversy, and it kind of haunted him for the next few years. So
Right.
so I think it kind of hurt the reception of the film when it was released a little bit. But yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know a lot about Kenny Everett, really. I mean, he passed away in the mid-90s before, well, we were around, but
I mean,
he's not someone...
I remember his TV show being, the whole all in the best possible taste and all that stuff. But it was, I think, its sort of heyday was kind of late 70s, early 80s. When we were a bit too young to be watching that sort of thing.
Exactly.
So, and I think he used to present Top of the Pops sometimes, didn't
Oh,
he?
he did,
So I remember
you're right.
him doing that because he was a DJ as well.
That's true.
For a long time.
Yeah,
so, I think that's what I mainly remember. I was aware of his TV show, but I think that's mainly what I saw him doing was presenting Top of the Pops.
The flip side here is that we have people like Edgar Wright making these kind of send up of horror films and genres now, and they're completely differently filmed, both in terms of the tone of it and the type of comedy that goes into it. But there are still links to the things that were done before, and is it kind of, I suppose there is a Britishness about it that Edgar Wright is very good at putting into his films too. I think if you're maybe if you're a fan of Edgar Wright, it's maybe an interesting thing to go back and look at how it was done, how these kind of comedies, send up of horror films and genres were done in those days. Yeah, I mean, so if you want to see it, it's on Netflix at the moment in this country.
I mean, if you don't have Netflix, it was released on DVD in the UK back in 2008. I think there was a featurette on there about 20 something minutes long, sort of behind the scenes sort of stuff. But it is out of print, so it's not cheap. If you do manage to find a copy, but if you got Netflix, then check it out on there. I was actually surprised how good it looked. It looked like it had been restored in some way.
Absolutely,
it was a nice sharp picture. Whether that means there'll be a Blu-ray at some point, I don't know, but I don't think I'll be rushing to buy it. To be honest, I've seen it. That's fine.
Yeah, it's one of those films that I'm happy to have seen it. I enjoyed it for what it was. It's an hour and a half. It's not, I mean, I said the pacing is quite slow, but it still kind of zips past quite quickly. Yeah. There's a few nice things to look out for. Some of the jokes were a bit,
of its time, shall we say?
Of its time, but some of it works, some of it doesn't. And I think there's some nice effects in there. They had some fun. There is a great moment in a slightly off-putting sequence where there's this kind of entity in the bed smoking a cigarette. And I thought that was done quite well. So this, they clearly had a laugh making the film. I think, if nothing else. But apparently Billy Connolly wasn't so keen on it. I was reading because so Ray Cameron's son is Michael McIntyre, the famous British stand-up comedian, and I was reading that when he met Billy Connolly, he brought the film up because obviously Pamela Stevenson is Billy's wife. And Billy just said, yes, she did do some shit films in her time, so he wasn't a fan. But, it is what it is.
Yeah.
So that was Bloodbath in the House of Death. And as always, if you enjoyed the video, let us know in the comments below.
Hit the subscribe button up there and don't forget to push the bell for notifications. There's other videos to check out over there. Come and find us on social media and join us again soon for another video.